Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Boyle. I'm Head of Global Partnerships with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. Small apology for not being able to make it in person. The aim of this intervention, though, to introduce the concept, the big idea of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And I'd like to start by thanking the co-sponsors of this event, Earth Governance Alliance, Parliamentarians for a Fossil-Free Future, and the Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament, and of course, World Future Council. Really important event, drawing those links between the efforts to secure a nuclear non-proliferation treaty and this real existential need to tackle supply of fossil fuels by securing a treaty for fossil fuels. Never before have we stood quite so close to the precipice, and as the clock is nearing midnight, we need to corral all the tools at our disposal to push back the drivers of the ecological and climate crisis. And we at the treaty team really do believe that a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty is one of those tools. And within that, I think also to state it as a tool for peace as well as climate action. And in that sense, really important for us to do what this event is doing and explore the linkages between what was, of course, a pro-peace treaty in the Nuclear Weapon Non-Proliferation Treaty. In that context, I'd also like to thank the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, who've been working with our research team on an upcoming policy brief entitled Stop Fossil Fuels from Fueling Conflict, which has informed a lot of the content that I'd like to touch on today. So big thank you to them. As we know, under the United Nations, currently we have the Paris Agreement, but this is non-legally binding, and currently we don't have anything as in terms of global agreement on fossil fuel production, and this leads to a lot of different risks. So obviously it's slowing down the transition. It means that the pathways for that transition become harder, they become steeper. It's going to be creating stranded assets, financial turmoil, risks to workers, to communities, society as a whole. It's delaying expansion of renewable energy, and it's also delaying economic diversification in a number of key regions as well. We're seeing the consolidation of power of pro-fossil fuel political constituencies and lobbies. And of course, we're risking the inducing global heating well above 1.5 degrees Celsius, above pre-industrial levels. As I was mentioning in this paper by Wolf, we also want to signal and note the correlation between fossil fuels and war. Interstate wars fought to secure, maintain flows of energy, fossil fuel revenues financing those wars, civil wars, separatist movements, the correlatory privatization of profit and the socialization of harm, and also this interlinkage between fossil fuel climate crisis exacerbating conflict, but then also fossil fuel military activity exacerbating the climate crisis as well. And here we can look towards Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as well as the ongoing genocide in Palestine, both exposing intersections of the climate crisis, fossil fuels, and wars as well. So not only are fossil fuel uses a threat in the context of the climate crisis, but it's also undermining the prospects for sustainable peace across the globe. Just to touch on a few of the key findings from the paper as well. Since the start of its invasion in Ukraine until November 2023, Russia accumulated more than 550 billion in revenues from its fossil fuel exports. 2023 alone, Global Witness found that Russian crude oil to the European Union resulted in 1.1 billion in direct tax revenues. Let's just translate that into military equipment. That's enough for 1,200 caliber cruise missiles or 60,000 Shahed drones, both of which have been used to bomb cities and kill civilians across Ukraine. Excellent civil society organization, Razom We Stand, have seen that Russia's seeking to allocate now a third of its total state expenditure to the military and the military industrial complex in 2024. I mean, this is huge. And then maybe we also just turn our attention quickly to seeing generally the military as a huge contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions. Conservative estimates putting that at 5.5% of global emissions. course, very difficult to calculate because under the Paris Agreement, military emissions are exempt from reporting obligations. But just to be clear, 1 year's military spending by the top 10 countries with the highest military expenditure could pay for the climate finance commitments under the Paris Agreement for the next 15 years at 100 billion a year. So yeah, I think here what we're seeing is how the idea, the concept, and then hopefully the inevitable legal framework for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty will be aiming to achieve and to tackle the large driver of the climate crisis, fossil fuels, but also promote greater international cooperation within that will look to establish, greater mechanisms for multilateralism and eventually peace as well. So within the framework of the treaty, we've got 3 pillars of what that would look like. We front and center the just transition, helping countries move their economies away from fossil fuels. The second, non-proliferation, stopping the climate crisis worsening by ending the expansion of new coal, oil and gas, and a fair phase out of existing fossil fuel production. Clearly, here we see the peace potential of this transition based on energy democracy, decentralized energy production systems, and building a fossil fuel treaty that will provide an international mechanism to fairly manage that global phase out of fossil fuels. Just to be clear, we see this as a complement to the Paris Agreement to balance out the supply side through the treaty with the Paris Agreement's focus on the demand side as well. Yeah, I think we also want to know, another group of treaties that can work as models, Chemical Weapons Convention, the Montreal Protocol, the Mine Ban Treaty, yeah, and also the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which was led by smaller non-nuclear states, and perhaps also that provides a little bit of a catalyst for thinking through our theory of change of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, where we have 5 phases towards achieving that treaty. Firstly, building the movement, growing the campaign, enlisting champions, and then using that to build political buy-in from the first mover countries. We currently have a block of 13, also supported by United Nations agencies. We have the World Health Organization has really recently endorsed the treaty. Fantastic to see building that linkage also between health and the climate crisis and health and fossil fuels. We aim to build consensus in these regional groupings, convening governments in high-level dialogues, and use existing fora, much like the one you're in this afternoon, to put this onto the political radar of decision makers as well. Moving on to the third phase, we want to then formalize the multilateral process, convening diplomatic working groups, build towards United Nations resolutions, and then eventually securing a formal negotiating mandate either inside or outside the United Nations. I think we need to be clear that this could also be built through negotiations directly between states who are endorsing the treaty as well. Yeah, the fourth phase there, negotiating the treaty, ensuring the treaty is ambitious enough, that it has the necessary substance to be able to meet those 3 pillars and principles that I touched on just a couple of moments ago, and then the ratification of a treaty that then takes us through to the final phase, which of course would be the long-term and rigorous monitoring of countries to hold them to account, monitoring their progress, keeping up pressure, campaigning for more countries to join the treaty, and also working with ally endorsing countries to ensure that happens as well. Yeah, maybe just importantly here, just to note more clearly the 13 nation states who have already endorsed: Vanuatu, Tuvalu, Tonga, Niue, Palau, Colombia, Fiji, the Solomon Islands, Timor-Leste, Antigua Barbuda, the state of Samoa, and the Republic of Nauru. We aim to quite aggressively expand that first mover group, aiming for about 22 countries by the end of the year. And just to be clear, those countries are already engaging at the diplomatic level as well, which is obviously a really important layer for pushing forward the prospects of achieving a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Just to bring this intervention to a close, and just to reiterate that we do see this as a mechanism for building peace, as well as for existential need for climate action. But of course, we need people to engage. And there's many organizations, individuals, champions endorsing this treaty and taking up actions. So what can you do? Well, firstly, we'd ask people to make public expressions of support for a fossil fuel treaty, including within international peace and security fora. You're in the United Nations sessions already this week, so great space to do that. Engage in those convenings, organize convenings of your own with like-minded country champions. Support that building of a group of champion countries. You can reach out to us as well, and link to our website, but also through our staff page, check out some of our colleagues, and we'll be able to talk through with you which countries we're targeting and who we think is important to bring on as part of that first mover block. Again, engaging in multilateral processes, United Nations being such an important space, particularly with the confluence of threats to multilateralism that exist within the globe at the moment. Yeah, support other fossil fuel supply side initiatives. You can see our toolkit for policymakers through our website. Great asset, great resource for those of you wanting to engage and see which other supply side initiatives we support. And then put domestic measures to governments that they can use to reduce that fossil fuel supply independence. And I'll flag the toolkit again there as well. And let's not forget to centre those most affected. The participation of those most affected by the climate crisis by fossil fuel and critical mineral extraction need to be fronted and centred in this transition. I just want to wish you the best for the rest of the conference. Thank you for allowing me this 10 minutes to make this intervention. And carpe diem.